Erika, a couple months ago, I go to a Patreon event in LA, which was really nice. Patreon had this thing where they brought in guest speakers. It was really classy, really professional. And one of the people that came up to talk, it's my own fault that I don't remember who it was, talked about the service called Bonjoro, where every time someone signed up to his Patreon, although you could also use it for Kickstarter or any other service where someone signs up, like your mailing list, like MailChimp or something like that. Anytime someone signs up to your service, you would get this notification from an app on your phone called Bonjoro. And what you would do is you would stop what you were doing, if it's comfortable, and you would hold up your phone and you would say, "Hey, Greg, it's Erika. Thank you so much for signing up to my Patreon. This means the world to me. You're directly making the comic happen. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy reading." And boop, and then it sends it to them right away, right?
Wow.
And the idea is when it's all synced up, you don't have to worry about it. It does all the back-end stuff for you. It sends the file. The file's on the cloud, so you're not emailing or texting this huge video file. And cool idea, right? It was fun.
Yeah.
And then, so I get home and I'm like, I'm gonna sign up for this Bonjoro. Let me just see what the fee is per month for $25 a month.
What?
$25 a month.
$25 a month. So for the low price of $300 a year, you can use Bonjoro.
But see, my pathway into this was even worse, because they've also got something that says that they've got a level that's free for life. And that's what I signed up for, because free for life sounds great to me. And then the fine print said free for life until you have posted 14 videos. And then you've got to move up to one of the pay levels.
That's not for life. That's free for 14 videos.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, Erika, I pledge to be married to you forever, or until 14 days have passed.
You get a life sentence, and really it's just 14.
Yeah, exactly. The judge with the gavel, I sentence you to life, bang, 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 or until you eat 14 sandwiches. Oh, well, then I'll just eat these 14 sandwiches.
Well, and so then I had signed up, right? So what happens when you sign up is they send you a Bonjoro welcome. That is basically, it's not one, it's a generic one. They say, okay, this is what it's going to look like when you do it. So they get you all set up. And I get my video, and I think it's the creator of Bonjoro, and immediately the lighting wasn't really great. I could perceive that he needed a shave. And not like that sexy 5 o'clock shadow. He was more, like stubble. And I recoiled. I'm like, and immediately I thought, oh my God, I'm not so sure I want to do this. But they say now you record a video and you can send it to yourself. And so I record a video that is welcoming me to Bonjoro. And I record it, I hit bloop, and it bleeps into my phone. And as bad as my reaction was to that guy, I made him look like Prince Charming.
Oh, no.
So, Brad, can I take it from here, because Brad signed us up for Comic Lab, right? So we both had access to this account, and so I see Brad's test video, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna check this out. And have you ever recorded a video where you hold it down at chest level and it's looking up rather than holding it up and looking down?
So like Blair Witch style.
Yeah, and it's not like some strong Soviet, mid-century propaganda where Lenin is holding his arm up. What I get on Brad is I get the triple chin look as he looks down at the camera and goes, "Hey, this is Brad Geiger. Thank you for signing up for Bonjoro and Patreon." And I'm like, and so as a friend who's known him for 20 years, I go, huh. That was my reaction. And so Brad and I had this conversation afterward, Eric, and it would be funny to get your thoughts. 99% of the time, people don't want to see what we as cartoonists look like.
Yeah.
And so they think they do, and we think maybe they do. But the truth is, nobody wants to see me on an average day wearing a T-shirt in the studio going, "Hey, how you doing? It's Dave Gillett. I just want to say hi to you."
Yeah, I agree. Patreon has that, at least when they launched, they had this big push of make a welcoming video to go on your front page. And for cartoonists, no, because they made it with YouTubers in mind and podcasters in mind. So people that kind of perform and if you're doing a visual art and you don't you're not really a performer type. You don't know how to hold yourself in front of the camera. You don't know how to like speak to it. It's more unappealing than appealing, you know?
Yeah, and Brad made an excellent point, which is that our artwork has an aesthetic, like for all three of us, our artwork has an aesthetic, it has a quality, it has a presentational style that, and no detriment to any one of the three of us, sometimes our own face doesn't match the style of our work, you know?
Sure, yeah.
Like in terms of overall branding, in terms of overall feel of the art, I'm trying to think of think of like the sexiest Picasso that you could think of, and then think of Picasso on his worst day, and you're like, oh Jesus, I don't want to look at Picasso. Get him out of here.
The first thing that came to my mind was that people, for the most part, are signing up for Evil Ink After Dark. They've got a very certain aesthetic in mind of what they're going to get when they sign up.
Yeah.
And when they get my face instead, that could be very off-putting. That's a buzzkill.
Well, yeah, like for let's say they signed up for Sheldon on Patreon, right? And then this kind of optimistic, hopeful, do kind of thing that, you know, that's the comic. And like, had I recorded this Bonjoro when I was 22 and although the world was ahead of me and life was great, but now I got to tell you both, time and tide has taken its toll. And so this is the Bonjoro video that they're going to get. Hello and welcome to Sheldon on Patreon. I'm thank you for supporting my dialysis machine.
Well, now listen, one thing I will say when it comes to videos, I am still very much in favor of a video with your face on it for an introduction to either a Patreon or a Kickstarter. I think if you're going to ask people to pledge money, being able to look them in the eye, even digitally, is something that's strong. Now, and that's something that obviously you can take some time and clean up and shave and make sure the lighting is right and make sure that you look halfway decent, your hair is combed, all that kind of stuff. So that I still believe, but the thing that turned me off about Bonjoro was that I was not going to be doing this every time I sent a Bonjoro. You know, this was going to be me on a normal day, which is not so hot.
Yeah, and so for me, a normal day, 90% of the time, it's not me. I don't want to say I'm a slob, but I'm not a slob. But if I'm in the studio, I haven't put a huge amount of time into my look, and you know, you want to put a best face. Like at a Comic-Con, I take the time to make myself presentable and delightful and optimistic and cheery. Whereas it's hard on a day-to-day basis in the studio to be like, now I'm selling a car, you know, that kind of a feeling.
Well, now listen to this, Dave. You didn't hear this part yet because this just happened. So so Erika, get this. I unsubscribed from Bonjoro. I'm like, this is not for me. This is never going to be worth $25 a month. Even if I started using it, never going to be worth it. And I unsubscribe, I shut down, I disconnect everything that I had connected. And the next day, I got a Bonjoro sent to me from this guy. That is the creator. Same guy.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And I click on it, and it says...
Oh, no.
But now there's a Jim Beam in the shot.
He goes, hey, Brad, just checking in with you. I saw that you signed up, and if you have any questions or if you need any help, just get in touch with me. I'll give you a quick rundown. And he did like a little bullet point. Here's what we use it for, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Brad, just really happy to have you aboard, and we'll talk to you later. And he was standing out, and it was the same face, same guy, standing out in the park, a very lovely day. And I thought to myself, wow, he recorded that just for me. And for a minute, I thought about signing back up.
Yeah, so that's why, like, there is an appeal to it. For me, the big kicker is the pricing of $25, which I think I don't know why that needs to be that expensive. No. With the cost of cloud storage, and I mean, maybe they just have VC money that they have to pay back quickly. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, I can see it being $25 a month because I don't know the technology that goes into that. I don't know the maintenance and how many employees they have, and you know all the back end costs. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure that service, when they price everything out, they do need to charge that in order to compensate and give a livable wage to whoever is working there. But as the person with the wallet, no, I'm not going to pay that.
Right. Well, and the thing, Erika, too, that I was telling Brad is that for lead generation for certain industries, like $25 a month is nothing. Like if you're a realtor or like a car salesman or a jeweler or somebody that's like looking for emailed sales leads, $25 is nothing. So I get that, but the problem is like Erika Moen on Patreon would have to send out 1,000 of these things for everybody that's signed up, and $25 per amortized across your average growth rate now. Like I don't know that $25 is worth it to you, you know, and so
no.
So I don't know how my feeling is that they need to figure out a pricing structure that's different for the type of creators they're going for. Like I'm not selling a $40,000 Lexus. I'm selling $1 a month Sheldon, or you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So anyway. All right, well let's get into it, shall we, everybody? Why don't we welcome everybody? Let's just give a warm welcome. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And welcome to our very special guest this week, Erika Moen from Oh Joy Sex Toy. Welcome, Erika.
Hi, thank you guys. I love this podcast. I've listened to every single episode. It's like I'm really, really delighted that I actually get to be on this podcast that I love. So thank you for
not as
me.
Delighted as we are that you are here.
Oh,
Absolutely. You are the first one getting a bonjoro.
That's right. That's right. A audio bonjoro.
yeah, I get an hour-long buongiorno.
Yeah, you do get an hour-long bonjoro.
And this week's Hour of Comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. And like I said, we've got Erika in here. Erika, the first thing we got to do, top of the line issue we got to cover. How's that Kickstarter going?
It's going real well. We're at 50K, which is awesome. Our asking baseline price that we needed to hit was 15K, and we got that in the first 6 hours of it launching.
Yeah.
And we've got 15 days left. So we're halfway through, and we've hit 50, which is freaking awesome. It's I have this weird mindset during a Kickstarter where even though it's going well, we've reached our goal, we've got some profit on top of it, in my head I'm like, but it's about to fail. Like in the next 5 minutes, something's gonna happen. It's gonna go down. It's everybody's gonna cancel their play. I don't know. Like I have this doomsday hanging over my head the whole month that we have a Kickstarter going. And then once it's over, and once those pledges get charged to the cards, then you have that week or two where you have to wait for it to go to your account. Then I'm fine. Once it's over, I'm like, oh, okay, all right, it's done, it's good, mission accomplished. But that whole month up ahead of time, even though I can see the numbers, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the end.
Yeah. No, I always fall behind on these things, or behind from what I should do, because in that first month, I can't even really take any of the document prep or anything seriously until I see that money in my account, and then I hit full bore. But and I know for that 2 weeks that they're processing credit cards, I should be using that time wisely, and I never ever do, and I'm always pissed at myself.
Well, let me ask you both. Do you think that's because, and I think this is fair to our own histories, that each one of the three of us, for 10 years, you would do a project or you would do a thing and you'd kind of get crickets. You know, you'd be like, well, that didn't work out. And so that even when you start to find success, you're like, well, here come the crickets any moment now. Like it's all going to come crashing down because I had 10 years of that. And you know what I mean? Like you get a muscle memory of, I guess, failure. And so it's hard to shake that, like, well, it's all going to fall apart now. This is it. All right, well, it's back to selling plasma for me.
Yeah.
Erika, I got to ask you, Dave shared like a real cool tip with us on Comic Lab not too long ago where he said that he charged up his Kickstarter pledges in the first day by releasing it to his Patreon backers as kind of like a soft launch. What are your tips? What are your approaches that you used other than creating a fantastic product? What did you do to make that you think may have helped this thing succeed so quickly where you hit your goal like almost immediately?
Okay. Well, I just want to say I did hear that tip, and I brought it up to my husband, Matthew Nolan. He's the co-creator, and he does all the business stuff. Yeah. He's the one who actually made the Kickstarter, did all of the back end on that. And I was like, hey, baby, what about doing this thing so like our patrons get an advance thing? And he's like, you know, it's a sweet idea, but it's really important that the Kickstarter makes its goal on the first day. And if we give it to Patreon, like I've got 1,000 and change people on there, and that's a much smaller fraction of my audience than, the freeloaders on Twitter and Facebook. I say freeloaders lovingly. And he was saying it's more important that we hit the mass of my audience and get our funding goal met as quickly as possible than it is to go to a smaller but very dedicated and loving audience and then that give them a 24-hour head start, and we wouldn't reach goal doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can see that thinking.
And so I don't know. It's a model that I would like to try with a different project. I have other Kickstarter ideas I'd like to do, like ones that are more just doing a weird art project focused. And for those kind of things, yeah, I think I would like to do go to my patrons first and say, hey, I've got these exclusive rewards that are, 10 slots here. You guys get first dibs, go to it. And then 24 hours later, I announce it. Mm-hmm. But for our books, for Oh Joy's Sex Toy, it is more beneficial for us to hit that number as quickly as possible because that builds a snowball effect. And
wow.
Well, because people want to back a winner and they want to back a sure bet and they want to get on the train for this thing that's just doing a skyrocket. Because like Kickstarters, you can have the exact same Kickstarter, exact same product offered. And if it gets funded in one day, it's going to go on to be super funded. But if that Kickstarter, for whatever reason, is a slow build and it hasn't been funded halfway through, 3/4 through, like it's the final week and it still hasn't reached funding, but it's real close.
Right.
Exact same product. Right. People, they are more reticent to pledge to it, even though they'd be getting the same thing as that super winner Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because it's because we're dumb apes and you just you're like.
No, I can see what you mean, because it's kind of like when you say, hey, there's going to be a party and it's going from 8 to midnight, and the party is just as fun at 11:30 p.m. as it was at 8:30 p.m., but there's something different about arriving when a party's just getting started and the excitement's building and it's out there than like, oh yeah, there's the last half hour of the party. Let's go to that. Like the energy is different at the end of a Kickstarter than at the beginning.
The only problem with that is I don't think, even no matter when I opened, I don't think I would have funded in the first day or in the first 2 days. In other words, I think I funded somewhere in the first week or maybe a little bit into the second week on this most recent one. But I don't think I would have funded on the first day no matter what. So then for me, I don't know that it would have made a lot of difference which way I went, other than doing it the way I did it. Then I've got something real nice to offer my Patreon backers who have kind of been the backbone of my business.
Well, and that totally makes sense. And for these other concepts for projects I'd like to do, those are things that I don't need it to fund in the first day to have the momentum build. It would just be like, no, I just want to do this one project, and it's it's not the make or break, because these book Kickstarters that we do each year, it's not just to print a book. It is to print a book, but also they're kind of our annual fundraiser to keep our company going in the first place. So once we reach that minimum of okay, we have enough to make the book, the rest of that money is like, we hire guest artists. We have a lot of business taxes. We need to have a livable wage in order to keep this being our full-time jobs. Like that is, I don't know, that's our venture capital, I guess. So like we really need these Kickstarters to do as well as they possibly can for us in order to keep doing this as our full-time jobs.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we go any further, and don't mention it, the site is drawntosex.com, right?
Yes.
And that'll take you right to you did what we suggested also, and probably you knew this on your own, but we're going to take credit for it.
You should.
But you set up a redirect, so if you go to drawntosex.com, that'll take you right to the Kickstarter, which is still in progress. And yeah, this is all of the Oh Joy sex toy comics that were specifically about sex education.
Yeah, because
What a
traditionally,
great idea.
Thank you. It's been the goal all along. We've been doing Ojoy for 5 years now, and the intention was always to do a book of sex ed. Even like the year before I launched Ojoy, originally I was working on a book for teenagers talking about how to become sexually active in a safe, like a mentally, emotionally, physically safe way. And then that shifted gears to be Ojoy Sex Toy, where I do these little weekly clips and I review sex toys and also here's some sex ed.
Yeah.
Because sex ed is where that's my passion. That's what I really truly care about. And we always wanted to do the sex ed book. It took 5 years to literally get to cover enough to go into the book, you know.
Can I tell you one thing that because the way you're pitching this Kickstarter, I want to compliment you because this is like the highest compliment between artists. Your
Oh my
hands are
God.
fantastic. I'm noticing this. I'm noticing this for the first time because I've always enjoyed your line art, but the communication level and expressiveness of your cartooned hands are
Wow.
delightful. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how because the hand is like a horse or a bicycle. It's one of those
Yeah.
like eternal struggles for artists. What is your approach to hands? Have they always come easy for you?
Nope. I'm shocked to get your compliment. Thank you very, very much. I still see my hands as some of my weaker qualities. I guess no, hands have always been a huge, huge struggle for me. And honestly, the last few years, what I would do is I've got photo booth on my computer, and whatever hand positions I would need to draw in the comic, I would take a photo reference of my hands in that position, and then I would pull because I'm working digitally, and then I'd crop out the hands and I'd slide them into the comic, and I would literally just trace on top. And the first few years, like I had to, because otherwise my hands were just like banana mash. And but now I'm actually at a point where I've got muscle memory, so I can draw. I think like 80% of my hands I can just picture it. I can just draw it. I can just look at my hand and draw from that because I understand those shapes now from having traced them so much.
Yeah.
But when it still comes to trickier hand positions, like I think a lot of the hands that I used on the promo images for the Kickstarter, I think those were all pretty heavily still like I still traced around a photo, and I try to. There's just straight up tracing where you just go along the perimeter of the shape, and it always looks kind of wonky when you take the photo away. And then there's kind of drawing on top of a photo, which is where you're using it as a guide, but you're drawing the form, even if it doesn't fully match up to every single little outline of the photograph. So it's more kind of a basis, but
Right.
but yeah, that's how I do that. That's tricks of the trade, kids. Trace.
Well, and I'm glad you're bringing that up because as artists, we tend to have a really uncomfortable relationship to photo reference because, again, a lot of us get very squidgy when we start thinking about tracing something. Oh, I'm not. That was the first thing you said when you were a kid, and somebody said, "Did you draw that?" And you'd say, "Yeah, freehand." That was the first thing. "Did you draw that freehand?" "Yeah, I drew that freehand, man. You know, Chuck over there, he traces, but me, I draw freehand." That was a point of pride for a teenage artist, right? But at the same time, there are some things that, let's face it, I remember drawing a tractor for Greystone Inn years ago. And I ended up just bringing photo reference in because I realized, and cars are the same way with me. Anytime I draw a car, forget about it. I could spend the next 3 hours figuring out the angles and building this car up from shapes, or I can find the car that I want at the angle that I want it and bring that sucker into Clip Studio. And like you said, the key there is not to slavishly try to get every one of those lines in exactly the right place. The key is to use that as a loose basis for your drawing and not to trace slavishly. But at the same time, you also think, "Oh, I hope nobody looks at this and thinks that I traced it because I'd be really embarrassed."
I'm not, actually. My relationship to tracing has been very different. It did not enter into my art experience until I joined Helioscope, which used to be Periscope. It's a comic book studio here in Portland. And that's when, because like I just didn't draw backgrounds. I just didn't draw are if something was gonna look weird, it was gonna look weird. That's just how I roll, dude. And at Helioscope, I had these veterans of the industry being like, hey, you know what you can do is take this, like, they are constantly taking reference photos of each other in the studio. Like there's a photo shoot like at least once a day where people say, and they've thumbnailed out their comic. They're like, hey, I need you with your arm over here and you're sitting and you're looking this way. And they just take these big photos that of whole scenes, of whole settings, of dramatic perspectives. And we're all working digitally. So then they pop those photos in, and these are trained artists. They know how to draw.
Right.
And they use these as the basis. And like a lot of times, like I pose for big burly cops, which obviously I don't look like. And if they were tracing me exactly, it would look completely wrong. But what they do is they take the position I was in, they take the foreshortening that I was there for, and they do like the skeleton breakdown, that artist chunky shape skeleton, and they do that on top of my photo. And then they draw on the real character on top of that. And so, that was my introduction to it. It was a really positive way of utilizing it as a tool. And it just, like, it speeds your process up. And I know, like, if you look through my comics, I'm not the best at it. Like, I will be the first to admit I'm not the best at it. You can definitely tell at times when you look through my archives, you're like, oh, yep, Erika definitely full on copy pasted that one, but over the years of doing it, like I've gotten a lot better, and I feel like my photo ref pictures at this point blend in pretty seamlessly with my just straight on drawing from no photo ref pictures.
Right. Well, and to build on that, I have a couple different thoughts, because I think this is exciting to talk about, because there is a stigma to it, and I think it's unnecessary. And one of the ways I think it's unnecessary is to look at the speed with which manga artists churn out Japanese comics. Yeah. And a big part of their system is like, use whatever resource you can to get this thing out. Exactly. Like if you need to hire assistants, hire assistants. If you need to trace, sometimes trace. If you need to use some kind of cut and paste speed line system or Kirby dot thing for the background that's already pre-made, use that. It's almost like it's not collage, but it's like, let's get it all on the page as quickly as possible because I have to produce 40 other pages today, you know? Right. And so like it's almost like the necessity has made that system go more accepting towards all the ways you can produce an image.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think collage is a good way to summarize that. You are just grabbing 100 little bits and pieces to get that sucker done as fast as you can. Yeah, it's a collage.
And there's still artistry in that, though, because you are, it's your discerning eye that's saying, I'm going, for example, like very often with Drive, when I need to create a new type of spaceship, right, it is not my forte. There are people that, like Jake Parker, that it's amazing insight into how machines work that can draw it immediately. It is not my skill set. So what I do is I will hunt for a specific and weird kind of part to a machine. Like I'll look for an air pump from a submarine, and then I will flip it upside down, trace it, and see what kind of a ship I can build off of it. You know what I mean? Because there is a realism there that the eye goes, yeah, okay, that is a shape that would make sense. But you know, you add a couple wings, a turret, a gun, maybe some jets on the back, and you're like, oh, there's a spaceship. And so it's the artistry of reinterpreting a physical object. And so for that reason, I don't feel like it's cheating. I feel like it's drawing from life in a way, you know?
I absolutely agree. And the thing is, like, we hear tracing and we think of, like, rip-off artist. We think of plagiarism. And disclaimer, like, I'm not talking about tracing somebody else's drawn images, because that's not okay. Right. But when it comes to photographs, I feel very differently about it. And especially for, like, drawing backgrounds. Like, if you're supposed to draw the New York skyline, like, you really think somebody's just supposed to sit there and draw every individual box and, like, do all the perspective? Like, no, you take a fucking photograph and you do the lines and, like, there, job done. And instead of spending 2 days on it, you spent an hour.
And the thing that goes unremarked a lot, but that both you and Brad talked about, is if you actually trace it and then take away the photo, you realize, oh, wait, this is wonky. And so that's when the artistry comes in, because then you cartoonify it in a way that fits your style. And that's true for both the human body and for physical objects. And That is really where it's almost like stage 2 of tracing, which is
Yeah.
okay. Now I have the reference down, but now I'm going to put it into my style. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, and like not even style, which obviously yes, style also, but even before style comes drawing the form. Like you still, one of the most helpful exercises I did at this an art class I took when I was in college was they had us. They gave us these photos of people that were in like yoga poses and deep perspective poses, and they said draw the form on top of this. So like physically, uh, do you know what is there a word for those chunky sort of skeletons that artists are always drawing? Just like the basic shapes of what a skeleton should be.
is it the kind of sandbag idea where the human body is a collection of sandbags? Is that the one you're thinking of, or not the
No,
pipe, not the pipe one, right? The ball and pipe.
yeah, yeah, the balls and the pipes and the head is
Yes.
a
Okay.
certain.
I actually think that I think Brad can correct me. I think that's called ball and pipe. Maybe
Oh.
I'm wrong.
It's certainly, when you said ball and pipe, that hit a resonance with me. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that feels right. So we were
Yeah.
supposed to draw the ball and pipe skeleton on top of these photos to understand to place up where everything should be going, and I found that so helpful in helping me break down human bodies later when I would just look at a human body. And well, a human body, I sound like an alien, but it gave me that muscle memory of like, oh yeah, that's where the ball is, and oh yeah, that's where that one pipe goes, and it would move like this. And so yeah, it's not just full on tracing. It's building the structure that would go into that pose on top of it.
And like you said, it's eventually the goal being that you start to have a muscle memory of the underpinning engineering and structure so that you can
Yes.
do it without even looking at reference.
Yeah.
But speaking of reference, I want to jump back, if it's okay with you, to talk about helioscope for a while, because Brad and I, this is a point of, frankly, and you'll appreciate this as a friend, this is a point of fascination to Brad and I, because it's like, how do I explain it? It's almost like if you have a social inability to go up and do open mic, right? And then you have a friend who's super able to just jump up there and lead a crowd for an hour. Brad and I look at you and Dylan and other members of Helioscope, and we're like, how do they work in a social setting constantly? Like, we are enough of introverts between the two of us that we are fascinatedly looking in at Helioscope and going, how does that work? So take us through the concept and the day-to-days of Helioscope, which collects, I think, 30 artists into one massive studio in Portland?
Yeah, something like that. Like I think officially on the roster, I don't know if we quite have 30, but it's I don't know, mid-20s maybe. Maybe it's starting, I don't know. And the reason why I don't know is because we have a core group of people who come in every day. And that's Dylan, that's me, that's Steve Lieber. It's a good handful of folks. And so like every day, I'd say we have around 10 people in the studio at their desks. And then we have people who come in several times a week on specific days. And then we have people who come in like once a month because they live further out of town. And then we have people who come in once a year who just keep their membership because there's other benefits to it than having that physical space to come into. Like there's one guy who lives, I think, a couple hours away. And he just he makes a yearly trip in. He's like, hey guys, how you doing? We're like, hey dude, good to see you. And so officially on the books, yeah, we've got a couple dozen people, but actually in the studio on a daily basis, it's much smaller than that. And
So-
the way,
Do you have your own desk, or are you using equipment that they've got there?
I do have my own desk, so I'm a full member. And that means I've got my own space, my own desk. Other people are floats, and they use whatever desk is available. And if the owner of that desk comes in, they got to shove off and go to a different open desk.
Oh, wait a minute. So someone else could use your desk if you're not there?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so game off for me. I would be
Yeah,
like, nope, I'm
yeah,
out.
yeah,
I'm out.
yeah.
Get off my desk. Nope, don't touch my stuff.
I'm way too territorial for that.
Yeah, the idea that someone would be drawing on my desk, I'd be like, nope, no, you don't get to touch it. Get out of here.
Well, you could put up a thing and like, hey guys, nobody is allowed to use my desk, and we'd be like, okay, cool, dude, because like there's still plenty of other desks, you know.
Well, this gets at the core of the fascination for me anyway. Is there is enough antisocial aspects to my personality. Like I would think that most people would think that I'm gregarious and outgoing and an extrovert, which is all true. But my default state when I'm drawing or when I'm working on my own is to be alone and to hermit and cocoon and everyone go away and leave me alone.
Yeah.
So I'm genuinely fascinated that you guys have found this environment to be beneficial to you.
Well, it's called headphones.
Yeah, but you're always going to have that one person that has their headphones on so loud that you can hear it from across the room,
No, they get tapped on the shoulder.
Oh, is that right? Now, whose job is it to do the tapping?
Whoever's annoyed.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
I would
like-
never.
No, the thing is, like, the
See,
studio,
but here's what would happen with me, Erica. I would just suffer in silence and be like, "Oh,
Yep.
Brad and his damn headphones over there. Listen to him."
I would just grind my
Okay.
teeth.
Yeah, I'd
The
grind my
no,
teeth.
The studio did do that for a very long time, and it is not tenable.
Yeah.
Tensions run high. Like the studio feels like a family to me, and I love it deeply. And also, like, we step on each other's toes. It's not always just perfect fun times. We all get along. Like, we have had to learn how to cohabitate, and it has become an absolute required necessity that if you are annoyed about something and something is just kind of burning you up, we're all passive aggressive introvert artists, so our default is to bury it down until it fucking explodes, and that's not tenable for a studio environment where we all have to work together. So through some very painful learning experiences, it's like, okay guys, this isn't our natural way of being, but yeah, suck it up, go talk to that person, and if you absolutely cannot talk to that person because you can't handle it, you're going to get somebody else to go talk to that person for you, which I guess sounds still kind of passive aggressive, but like the message gets relayed. Hopefully course correction can take place. And for the most part, like we all have kind of put on our big boy pantses, and we do speak up if somebody is stepping on your toes.
Well, again, this comes from a point of both fascination and admiration on Brad and I's part that you have made this work, because I was telling Brad, like, I have a delightful assistant, Beth, who is amazing and adds so much to the process for Sheldon and Drive and to my overall work environment, and she's amazing. But today she has a day off, and there's a part of my personality that's like, hooray, I'm by myself, like, because that's how antisocial I am at my default state. So the idea of being around a dozen, maybe 24 other artists, but I mean, I get the benefit of it, the ability to walk to another desk and saying, hey, I'm really having trouble drawing this tree, chair, hand, dog. Can you help me with this? Or, hey, how do you do that one effect in Photoshop? Or, 1,000 other things that an artist could share with another artist. That sounds amazing to me. But then there's all the human stuff of like, Greg leaves his Chick-fil-A wrappers all over his desk and it drives me nuts. Or Susan is a clean freak and it's driving me nuts that she's judging my coffee cups, or like whatever human officey kind of problem you could imagine would be sitting in the back of my head, and I think would impede my creativity. So I'm impressed that you are able to make it work.
Well, I think also the core members who founded it 15 some years ago, like, they are what you're describing. It's not like these are people who are like, these are the extroverts, these are the people. It's just, these are people, their careers got going before the internet. And they would literally be in solitude, basically 24 hours a day, until the spouse, if they had one, came back from her regular job. And they were going nuts. Like, it was really taking a toll on their mental health, to just be in their stink caves all day and not knowing how to interact with people anymore.
Stink caves, that's amazing.
And they would let's see, I think what happened is that they would call each other on the phone and have like hour-long conversations while they were working. And then that evolved to once a month they would meet up and do a drink and draw. And from the drink and draw, that's where they started talking about, like, what if we did a studio together? And it's not like, because I just want to talk all day. It was like, because I'm going insane.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm speaking from a point of internet privilege and the fact that we do interact now, even by the fact that you, Erica, are sitting in the Northwest, I'm sitting in the Southwest, Brad's sitting in the East Coast, and we're all talking to each other in a shared VoIP system. Like, this would have been so expensive 20 years ago on a phone call to figure out how to teleconference. So yeah, I mean, we're sitting at a point of like we can when we want it, we can reach out pretty easily. But
Yeah, and other cartoonists who don't have a studio, like they have these ongoing Skype calls that they just like turn on Skype and they just have a group chat throughout the day. When they can, so it's that. It's just we go in real life.
yeah, and as much as I say like, oh, I love the alone time that when my assistant has the day off, the simple fact is though is that if I were to allow myself the default state of being alone all the time, that is not good for my mental health to be alone for that great stretch of time. So, I've figured out some sort of balance of like alone time, but alone time near other people.
And that's what the studio is.
I guess that's the version of what you have, isn't it? Is that because boy, we all know that friend, that artist that's in their studio, either a painter, a sculptor, a cartoonist who's in their studio too much by themselves. And when they do venture out, it takes like 20 minutes of conversation before they're like back to normal. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of blinking at the sunlight and like, yeah, this is really like the conversation is stunted. They're a little weird. You know, when you go out to like a shared lunch with an artist.
Yeah, they've got to reacclimate to society again.
Yeah, and Erica, do you find that your creativity, your sparks of ideas are helped or increased by being in a shared studio environment?
Well, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, yeah, I will say to the studio, like, "Hey guys, what rhymes with dildo?" When I'm working on a script or something, I'll get outside input when I'm looking for a pun about something. But I wouldn't say that like I'm drawing necessarily inspiration for my comics from the studio. It's more just having the process of leaving my house and taking the bus or riding my bike and going to my other workspace and having a place where I sit down and work, and then I can take breaks and say, "Hey, Joe, what you working on?" And, "Hey, who wants to get lunch?" And then go back to work. Like having a socialized system, that's what keeps me functioning.
Right.
And then also, like, if I get my studio mates to pose for me, and never for anything like super explicit. But yeah, I just it's not so much inspiration, just practical help.
I like Brad's evil chuckle in the background.
I was just picturing what that would look like.
I remember like one time I needed to have like a really tiny person jerking off a giant cock. Like, I mean, like an elf-sized person with a giant towering cock. And I had my studio mate, Ron Chan, actually. And we had a great big round recycle bin type of garbage can thing. And so I had him posing, like holding it, and what would he look like if as an elf person doing that. And so that was fun. Those pictures are on the internet. But when it comes to like full on like people doing something sexual with each other, like, no, I do not ask my studio mates to do that.
And that's the hardest part of doing those scenes is, like I've said before, getting everything to line up.
You guys have a very different workday than I do. Let's just put it that
way. Yeah, you do not want to go through my search history.
I know, right?
Oh,
I must
man.
look bizarre if you go through my search history. It's like not okay what's in there.
Well, listen, I just noticed that we've been doing this for about 45 minutes, and we haven't gotten to any of our Patreon questions because we just love talking to Erika so much. Do you want to do a Patreon question real quick, Dave?
Let's do it.
All right. So here's one, and it's a three-parter. So I think we can kind of knock these down one at a time. This person asks, could you say a few words about your approach to character design? And then part two, do you consider merchandise or marketing with initial designs? And part three, how do you approach diversity and inclusion? Mm-hmm. So going down the list, Dave, what is your approach to character design?
So there's the high-minded way that I think that I do it, and then the actual way that I do it. So let me start with the high-minded way, because I'm a big fan of the silhouette technique, which is that you want characters. At least for mine, like both of you have very human-based comic strips, of which, granted, there's a lot of size and differences in human shapes. But for me, I have a lot of animal menageries, or I have a lot of alien menageries in my comic strip. And so for me, I like to have a mix of tall and thin, short and fat, squat, strong, wiry, jello-like, different aliens and animals that have very different shapes and feels. And the idea for me is that, and this was a trick that that Scott Kurtz taught me a lot of years ago, which is that you want to design it so that the silhouette itself would be recognizable. Like if you backlit Mickey, you immediately know Mickey Mouse. If you backlit Bone, you immediately know Bone. And so you want a character that even from their outline is standoutish, right? Okay, so that's my high-minded way of doing it. Here's how it actually works, though, is that let's say I need an alien, or let's say I need a goose or something in Sheldon, or an alien in Drive. What actually happens is on a single page or 2 pages, I just keep doodling until I go, oh yeah, that one works. All right, we'll do that one. So the high-minded way is like, oh, I've got to have a unique, mwah, almost French chef kiss. Mwah, I've got to have that the silhouette that's perfect. And then the reality is, all right, that sketch is good enough. That one's going in.
I still think there's a little bit of that first high-minded bit that's going to go into it also, into your sketches. Because like the one you're choosing where you're like, oh, that's good enough, that is the one that's going to have the strongest silhouette. You know what I mean?
Right. So it's almost like if for me, the benefit of a strong silhouette is that when you have 5 or 6 of your characters walking in a hallway shot or in a long pullback shot, a single camera pullback shot where they're going across like a plane or something, you want them in a very reduced form, silhouette form, to be instantly to be able to go, oh, that's Bob, that's Greg, that's Susan, that's Linda, that kind of thing. And so your mind, or now, 20 years after cartooning, I now maybe know intuitively, Erika, to your point, that like, okay, that is enough of a silhouette distinctiveness and it works, and also I love the energy of the sketch. But Erika, let's hear about you. I would love to hear how you approach that first page part of this question.
Golly, I was trying to figure out my answer when I first started the question, and I'm not really 100% sure. At this point, okay, so my comic, it's really important that I draw a lot of different types of people into it. So like my husband and I are the narrators, and I've really got a shorthand for how to draw us. But then I have these folders and folders of different body types, of different ethnicity features, of different hairstyles. And when I need to make a volunteer character to go into a comic to do all the sex stuff that I'm not going to draw Matt and me doing, the first thing that I sit down and think about is, okay, well, what body types and ethnicities did I draw in the last couple comics? What haven't I covered in a while? And I mentally cycle through and I just pick features that are going to be different from the last few features that I drew. And I go through my folders. And then I find people that fit those different features, those different body types, and I start constructing a character just based off of all these different aspects that I haven't drawn in a while. So that's how it is for Oh Joy. I don't know. Sorry, it's not a great answer.
No, that is a great answer because
is it?
Yeah, that's as someone who doesn't draw a lot of humans per se, that's fascinating to see that you keep folders of body types and features and looks and types and tints.
Yeah, like
I think it's great.
When Mitt Romney said, "I have binders full of women," it's like, yeah, so do I.
That's what a great reference. God, that's going into the Wayback Machine. That's great. So for you, do you, because Dave Malky with Wondermark has this where he has a lot of Victorian reference art that he pulls from, right? And I guess this is a version of a question that I've always wanted to ask him, which is once you use a body type, once you use a person, do you delete them from your photo folder? You know what I mean? Like, is that body type gone? No, so they stay in there. You just have a mental checklist. Like, no, I know I used them somewhere in the last 6 months.
Yeah, well, and I'm always reconfiguring. Like, I'm just taking different aspects. So, like, I'll take this. Like, there's so many different kind of plus size bodies that are out there. Like, the fat hangs differently on each person. So I'll take Exhibit A, and then I'll match them up with the racial features of somebody else, like from a Polynesian island, and I'll match those two things up, and so I make this brand new character. But then later I could take that same body type and I'd match them up with a white person, and so I'm still going to get a wide variety of people out of it, but it's going to be different each time, and it's very valuable for me to keep those photo references so that I can still reference them to draw the features and the weight that I do from each one.
And that again speaks to the artistry. In large part, comes in the editing too. Like you have that photo reference, you have them both there in the folder, but where the artistry creeps in is where you go. Now I'm mixing and matching. Now I'm making new things from these reference.
Yeah, I'm collaging them.
Yeah, you're collaging them, but that's fascinating. I'm fascinated by that as a process. And in general, I should say that I am super in admiration of you because I realize how boring and plain Jane I am with most of my character designs when I see how very specific, in terms of humans, how very specific you become in a way that's beneficial to the whole comic. It's great. It's really, it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, and also I neglected to mention this, but in Kickstarter once a year, we sell these slots for people who want to spend a lot of money on us to be a masturbateer in the comic. And a masturbateer is the little volunteer character who runs around naked and does the sex stuff.
Yeah.
And so a good number, like a high percentage of the people that I draw as masturbateers in the comic, they are the actual person who sent me reference pictures. And I ask them for them to be clothed. I don't ask people to send me naked pictures.
Oh, God.
Although I think in the 5 years we've been doing this, we've had one or two people who are like, no, I'm cool with that. I want to send you Starkers. And I'm like, okay, buddy. But otherwise, they send me clothed photos, and then I just imagine what the underneath would look like based off of how, just based off what they look like with their clothes on. And so, yeah, a lot of the characters that show up, I'm just kind of caricaturing these turnarounds that I've had people take of themselves.
And what was the branding phrase that you used for that group of people?
Masturbateer.
So the historical, for people that love cartooning history, one of the things I wanted to point out was that was actually the original phrase that Walt Disney was going for. But
it didn't fit in the song.
Yeah,
it had too many syllables.
His brother pulled him aside and said, "Walt, it's working great, Walt. I love everything about it. What do you think, though? Just hear me out. What do you think about Mouseketeer instead?" And they're like, "All right, well, let's go that route." So,
yeah.
Oh my goodness, MIC, see you really soon.
So Brad, let's put this one to bed. How do you do character design?
Yeah, listen, don't go by me. I do a lot of what you do. I will fumble around until a series of happy accidents gets me into a place where I'm like, oh, I like how I did that. This sketch, I like how I did the eyes. This sketch, the nose worked out well, and then I will, like a blind man, kind of stumbling through a dark room, I will finally find something that gets close and then refine that. And I'll go through pages and pages and pages of a sketchbook trying to find, especially, like I do a lot of things where a villain comes in and he's just going to be there for 1 week, or a villain comes in and she's just going to be there for that one joke. But it's got to be just the right type of character. And those are sometimes the hardest to do because they don't have to be anything, and they could be anything. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's really tough. I wish I had some good advice other than to say that it's one of those things that you do slowly get a little bit better at the more you do, because pretty soon your brain gets into that zone and you can start to do this. But I don't know. I don't know if I had good advice on character design.
Well, no, I think Erika might echo this with me. I think in your own, albeit stumbling way, you did say a good approach, which is that's happy accidents, is that you just kept working at it until you got, you said it in a more self-denigrating way, but it's a version of what Erika and I said, which is you use your editorial critical eye after looking at reference art, after looking at your own doodles, and you eventually go, oh, that one works. And so you said a version of what Erika and I said, frankly. I'm saying this as a friend. Like, you don't need to be self-denigrating about it.
I like the way you said it better.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Brad, love yourself. There's two friends on the phone here saying, love yourself, Bradley.
Well, I appreciate that. But there's one thing I do want to get at before we sidestep it. Diversity and inclusion, because that's clearly one of the hallmarks of Oh Joy Sex Toy. When you read that comic, you get the very, very clear indication that diversity and inclusion are really important to you, Erika. Give me some thoughts. Give me your thoughts on why that is.
Oh, because I'm a dumb white girl?
Well, that's something I want to get into as a dumb white guy.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we got 3 dumb white people here.
Yeah.
Let's solve diversity.
Well, I don't know that we're going to solve it, but I am going to say this, jumping into what you said. I think for a lot of people who come from backgrounds that are similar to us, we're a little bit intimidated by diversity because we don't want to do the wrong thing or to make a mistake that we maybe were dopey about or weren't cognizant of. And now, instead of just doing something dopey, we've done something that is a slur or that is offensive. Yeah. I won't even say slur because slurs are pretty obvious. Everybody knows what a slur is.
That one, I think we all pretty know much not to do slurs.
But maybe you've done something now and you've become offensive. And I think that I don't think. By the way, if you feel that way, number one, it's okay. You're not alone. But there are people that feel, but it's not an excuse to run away from it, right? It's in fact, it's maybe an indication that you need to be careful about it, be thoughtful about it. But what is your advice to somebody who says, "I want to do more diversity, I want to do more inclusion, I just don't know how to do it"?
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna say right off the bat, like I feel really insecure in this subject, and I feel very out of my depth. I know I do it every day, and I get a lot of props for it, which also makes me uncomfortable because I don't. I'm a dumb white girl. So what I do is I really made an active effort to diversify my social media consumption. So my default, my whole life, like I was just predominantly surrounded by white people, and I didn't have a lot of exposure to being around other cultures, other ethnicities. And my internet looked a lot like that. And it wasn't by choice, or not conscious choice anyway, maybe subconscious. But my peer circles were predominantly white people, and social media, the social media I consumed, especially like the picture stuff, was, mostly white girls doing pretty white girl things. And what I do now is I follow a shit ton of accounts of people of color, of transgender people, or people who are just not cisgender white women. And it's given me a visual of what other people look like. And God, I feel so nervous stumbling over my words. But the point is to to really physically show these other features and pay attention to the photos that are coming through, and to differentiate, like, why does their nose look different in that picture than just like a white girl nose? Right. And to pay attention to those details. And so the idea is to kind of submerge your eyeballs in the other, whatever the other may be, and to get yourself used to looking at the other. And then, like, just also as far as like beauty standards go, I grew up with the understood message that if you're fat, you are unhealthy. Like, there's no other way to look at that. And if you are fat, you are unattractive. That's just the way it is. Right. And then following all these body positive accounts and all these fat is beautiful accounts, and rewiring what my brain perceives as beautiful. Whereas before it's like, oh, she has a big underarm, flabby bit under her arm, like, that's gross. And then following these accounts or somebody's like, no, I fucking love that part about my body. That part of my body is so awesome. And here's this really artistic picture of that part of my body. And I'm just like, I'm going to treat that part of my body like art. And you see the pictures that they're taking, and you see the essays that they write about that. And it just kind of helps rewire how you were looking at these things before, in the way that, like, our society said, like, oh, that's just ugly. And you just kind of submerge yourself into online cultures where they're saying, like, no, actually, this is beautiful, or if not beautiful, at least like this is just a normal part of a body. This isn't this isn't beautiful or ugly. This is just a
Right.
body. Look at it as a body. So that's what I do. God only knows I'm a dumb white girl. I'm doing the best I can.
Well, no, but that's the message, though, isn't it? I mean, we all have our own backgrounds and our own preconceived notions, and we all see people who are different than us as falling into different stereotypes, whether it's visual or cultural and so forth. And I think the takeaway here is that it is a good thing to be able to draw a diverse cast and to focus on some issues of inclusion. And inclusion's the other part of that. Diversity is one thing, but I think the writing that I like to read when it comes to comics is not necessarily that. And this is a weird way of putting it, so hang with me. They don't have a gay character. They have a character who's gay.
Yes.
In other words, that character doesn't come into the panel and start saying all this stuff that is, hey, I'm a gay character. I'm over here being gay. I'm going to sit down in my gay chair and open my. So it's not that. It's a character who has a life and has a whole series of reactions, and being gay is just one of those character traits.
Yeah.
And that's the writing that I tend to respond to, right? And I think that's maybe the challenge for those of us who feel the need to do better, and I count myself among those. Is that, yes, it's a challenge. It's something that you can very easily end up making a misstep. But, and I can tell you this from like my Patreon backers, every now and again, if I do something that is like, hey, did you know that this stereotype exists, or did you know that that somebody might look at this and see something different than what you're intending? Sometimes you make mistakes, right? If you are honest and forthright about what you're doing, you'll find, at least in my opinion, very few times does somebody look at you and say you were trying to do something mean. You know what I mean? They're not gonna call you out. They're not gonna say you were specifically trying to do something bad when you make a mistake that is understandable. And if you're honest with yourself about what your motives were, if you're honest with yourself about what your approach was, I think you're going to find it's a little easier to walk that path.
Well, something that I struggle with a lot, though, is that I get feedback on the exact same character in the exact same comic, and I will get negative and positive feedback from people who are of the same whatever identity category as that character. And one person says like, oh my God, I saw myself in there, or that looks like my cousin, and thank you so much. It was really great to see this representation, da 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 da. And then I got another person, exact same identity category, who's like, wow, that was stereotypical and not okay, and clearly you're a racist. And it's like,
whoa.
Well, and that is literally like every single comic.
Well, isn't part of the problem there, and it's really, it speaks to how our overall cultural media is so limited, is that, like, let's say you grow up as a kid in, I don't know, pick a city, Fresno, but your family is South Pacific Islander, right? And you watch television, you look at magazines, you look at, you go to see a play, you do, and the simple truth is, you lived most of your life and you didn't see a South Pacific Islander character anywhere. Like, you didn't see it on TV, you didn't see it in magazines, and so then here comes Erika along, and she's got a character that happens to be South Pacific Islander. And you finally get representation, and you're like, damn it, that's not the way I wish it would have been, So the problem is it carries so much weight, and bless them, that shouldn't be an issue that one character has to carry that much weight, but it does. So if you, and this is the problem, and why we just need more voices coming into the conversation, because then it doesn't have a singular weight that. Like, for example, like I'm trying to think of a character. Professor Xavier was the representation of every white man, right? And then you'd be like, well, I guess they're all in wheelchairs
Yeah.
and they're all bald, right? That would be. And so if you were a white dude that never saw yourself in media, you'd be like, wait, some of us have hair and some of us are not in, you know. And so, like, if you're a South Pacific Islander and Erika includes a character in, and then it carries so much weight because it has to represent all the failings of media and TV and magazines in not having included you your entire childhood.
Yeah. Well, so my approach is that Matt and I write our scripts, and we have Matt and me as the narrators, and then we've got our character who's going to have their bits of line. We write all that with no image at all of what the master material is going to look like. And then when it comes time to actually draw it, and I've laid out all the dialogue, and I've laid out the stick figures, and then at the point when I actually have to draw the figure in, that's when I'm like, okay, what's this person going to look like? Or, okay, who's the master material who paid to be in it that I'm going to draw this time?
Yeah.
And so in my head, I am not, like, their physical appearance is being plonked on at the very last stage. It's not like, okay, the character's a South Pacific Islander. How are we going to write them? It's like, no, that's just like the dialogue's been written. The actions have been sorted out. Now, what's this person going to look like? Here's an interesting person. Plonk them in. And I'm not saying that's foolproof. I'm sure that opens me up to a lot of missteps, but that is how I approach it.
Right. So you're saying, like, start from the fact of, oh, they're a human being, and then we'll figure out, like, we'll plunk a face onto it. Yeah, like, I think that's a smarter way to do it, is that, like, if you just come from the fact of, like, what is their interesting humanness in terms of this moment, and then, oh, I'm going to pick this representation for that. That's
well, and, going back to the how do you design characters question, when I was studying, in the books, like, this is how you draw cartoon characters, there would always be that thing like, okay, now if you're going to draw a bad guy, you're going to give him tight, beady set eyes. You're going to give them sharp, angular corners. You're going to make them skinny and waspy, or it's a lazy character. You're going to draw lazy and dumb. You're going to draw them like as kind of chubby and big, and like these shorthands for physical features that translate to personality traits and morality traits. And it's worked as a shorthand all these decades, but I see us now, this younger generation coming up that's growing up with Steven Universe, all the Tumblr kids that have been doing comics on Tumblr, who have very actively been choosing to go against those old shorthands. And they're drawing their brave and courageous character as plus size. Like, this guy is chubby and they're super sexy. And I see that we're in a shifting time of our cultural shorthand for cartooning.
Well, and for me, I think this generation has benefited from the fact that the internet, because there are less gatekeepers, there's not a 65-year-old white editor limiting who can do their comics online. Right. And that just makes such a difference. You just see a totally different group of voices coming up in webcomics in the last 10, 20 years than you would have in the 70s. Or, you know what I mean? That if you had to go work for Hearst or, I'm trying to think of an old syndicate, but United Features or something, or even Marvel or DC. But it's funny because it's something that I look to you, Erika, as, I always like to look for friends and peers for inspiration. And this is an area where in the beginning of my career, I have to be completely honest about it. I failed. I failed at this. And I think I failed because of insecurity, of fear, of all the things that you just don't want to get it wrong. And so by not wanting to get it wrong, you end up not doing anything. And that itself is perhaps a bigger failure. And it's one that as I get older and more comfortable with myself, I have to admit that I failed in that regard. And so as I go through my career, I would like to think that by the time I'm of a death age, I don't know what I was trying to get. By the time I die, that's the way. By death age, what is it? By the time I die, I hope that I will say that I got this is a part of my art that I got better at.
Yeah.
Because I look at my 20s and 30s self and I go, oh, you were really, I see you. I see that you were afraid, basically. And so it's something that I have to get better at. And this is one of those, we all have like 10-year goals for yourself. This is one of my 10-year goals for myself is to get better at representation in my comics.
Something that I struggle with a lot is that, like, my comics are very diverse, but the fact that I am a white woman who's doing this comes with its own baggage. And
Oh, absolutely.
and
yeah.
something that gets said about me pretty regularly, and I think about a lot, is that like I'm just doing tokenism, and I'm just doing this to make myself, the human being Erika Moen, look good. Like it's just a performative thing, and I can see that, I can see merit in that, but also so my only other alternative to not be tokenizing and self praising is to like, what do I just draw white people then, because that doesn't sound right either. so I the imperfect way of operating that I go through is just like, okay, well, I'm dumb and I'm white, and I think it's really important that non-white people show up in my comic, and non-skinny people and disabled people. I think that's really important, and I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to accept that it's probably imperfect, and I'm going to get the email that says, I really appreciated that, and I'm going to get the email that says, wow, you really fucked that up, and I'm just going to keep doing it as best I can.
Yeah, and I think Brad hit on something. Brad hit on something earlier that I think is so key, which is that if you just come from a humility aspect of I am trying, my fellow humans, I'm looking at you in the eyes and saying I'm trying, and I do. Am I succeeding? God, no. I fail 40 times every day in different ways. But frankly, if we just be kind to one another about the attempts we make to reach out, and not just in this, I mean, in terms of like, there are times where you try to write a specific angle in a character, or a specific joke, or a specific background, and it might land with a thud. And I think I see it in other cartoonists, and see it in my own art, of like attempts like this where it just didn't work. But when the heart is in the right place, and when you at least approach this from kindness, both as a reader and as an artist, I think that ameliorates a lot of the wanting to get your hackles up right away.
Yeah.
From an imperfect attempt.
Well, I've always said this about Erika. If I had the courage in my entire body that Erika has in her little finger, I would be a superhero. And so kudos to you for not shrinking back when you get both sides of that. The you did good, and you're a horrible person.
Yep.
Good for you that you don't shrink into the fetal position and say, well, then I'm not gonna do any of this. Screw y'all. I admire you for that, and it makes your work all the stronger in my eyes.
Right, because it's a version of like, we get this even with jokes, Brad and Erika. Like sometimes you'll have a joke where you'll get an email be like, that was the greatest joke ever, right? And then we get the exact same joke. You get someone being like, hey, good job, hacky. Like way to write an old vaudeville joke from 1930 that I remember from Abbott and Costello. And you're like, this was the same joke. Why? And so, but then you add on 250 years of institutionalized American racism on top of that, and you're like, so you get the exact same reaction in terms of, hey, that joke is hacky, and then you get it in terms of representation, and you're like, oh, this is so much weightier and heavier and more meaningful, this criticism, and so it's a lot to unpack with it. And I give you so much credit for at least trying, because I admit publicly that I fail very heavily on this front, and I like Brad. I think your approach is one that we should all strive more and more for.
Oh, well,
absolutely.
Thank you, fellow white people, for approving how I do diversity.
Oh, Dave, Erika, do you guys hear that guitar?
Yes, I do.
We do, Brad.
Good answer. That means you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net.
And our special guest today, Erika Moen. You know her from ohjoysextoy.com. Go check out her Kickstarter, Drawn to Sex. Just put in drawntosex.com, and you're going to get a chance to get her new book, which is all sex ed comics. And Erica, honest to goodness, I'm looking down these pledges. They're incredible. There's some real good buys to be had here. There's some good deals you've got going on. I mean, this isn't just supportive books. So people can really get their hands on some good stuff at some good prices.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if you want to be drawn in as one of my masterbateers, this is the only time and place that you can reserve your spot for that is through this Kickstarter.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Color me tempted. And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
My wife likes the kombucha as well, but I got to tell you, for me, I it's always reminiscent of a very specific horse urine kind of flavor that I'm
Does it
not
take
a fan
you to
of.
your youth?
Yeah, it reminds me too much of my summers in Maine, just drinking horse urine, so no, it's just kombucha. Just I don't know what it is. It's like it's mixing everything you loved about vinegar and urine into one cup.
It's now I've never had it, but it sounds like drinking like pickle brine.
Yeah, if you combine pickle brine with a large draft horse's urine and a bottle of vinegar, pickle vinegar, then yes.